They pushed her forward before she could breathe. Amina's bare feet scraped the dusty ground as laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted that this was her wedding day. Someone else clapped. At the center stood the groom, a crippled beggar leaning heavily on a worn wooden cane, his clothes hanging loose, his head bowed in shame. Her stepmother's smile was calm, satisfied. "This is the husband you deserve," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Amina's hands trembled inside the thin borrowed dress. She searched the faces around her for mercy and found none. Only curiosity. Only judgment. The beggar lifted his head for a brief second. His eyes were steady, sharp, watching everything. Far down the road, unnoticed, the low hum of engines grew closer. Something about this marriage was terribly wrong.
Before we continue, where are you watching from today? What country? And what's your local time right now? If stories like this move, you don't forget to subscribe and stay with us.
Amina Okoye learned early that silence was safer than questions. After her father died, the house on Oladipo Street did not feel like home anymore. The walls were the same faded yellow paint hairline cracks crawling like veins, but the air inside had changed. It became heavier, sharper, as if every breath had to be earned. Beatrice Okoye moved through the rooms like a queen who had finally won her war. She wore grief for a few months after her husband's burial, dark dresses and loud sighs, but her eyes were already calculating. By the time the mourning cloths were folded away, Amina understood the truth. Her father had been the only shield she ever had. Beatrice wasted no time reclaiming what she believed was hers. She took over the small tailoring shop Amina's father had left behind, saying a young girl couldn't manage business. She locked away documents, bank papers, even Amina's birth certificate, claiming they were safer with her. Every decision became final, unquestionable. When Amina asked about school fees or training programs, Beatrice laughed. "Education for what she would say, so you can embarrass me later by thinking you're better than this family." Amina was 19 when she stopped asking. Her days began before sunrise. She swept the compound, fetched water, cooked meals she rarely ate herself, and walked long distances to buy supplies. At the market, women her age chatted about classes, jobs, relationships. Amina listened from a distance. Her hands busy, her eyes lowered. She learned how to disappear in plain sight. At night, she lay on a thin mattress in the back room, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes she remembered her father's voice, gentle, steady, telling her she was smart, that the world could open for her if she stayed kind and strong. Those memories hurt more than hunger. Beatrice had a daughter of her own, Sad, just 2 years younger than Amina. The difference in how they were treated was obvious and deliberate. Sade wore new clothes, had a phone, talked openly about boys and parties. When Amina passed by, Sade smirked. "You're not really family anyway," she once said casually. "Just remember that." The words lodged deep like thorns. Despite everything, Amina never learned to be cruel. When Beatrice insulted her, she answered softly. When customers at the shop shortchanged her, she smiled and let it go. It wasn't weakness, it was survival mixed with something stubborn and human. She believed quietly that goodness had its own memory, that somehow, someday it would matter. On her rare trips to the market alone, Amina often passed a man sitting near the roadside, close to the old bus stop. He was hard to miss, not because he begged loudly, but because he didn't. He leaned on a wooden cane, one leg stiff and dragging when he tried to move. His clothes were clean, but worn mended too carefully for someone careless. He rarely raised his voice. When people dropped coins, he nodded in thanks. When they mocked him, he said nothing. Amina noticed how children stared at him with curiosity, how adults avoided his eyes. Disability made people uncomfortable. Poverty made them cruel. Once, when Beatrice sent Amina to the market late in the evening, she saw a group of young men laughing as they kicked dust near the man's feet, calling him useless. Amina froze fear, pressing her chest. She wanted to intervene, but she knew what happened to girls who spoke too much. The man met her eyes then, not pleading, not angry, just aware. Amina looked away and walked faster, ashamed of her own fear. At home, Beatrice's behavior grew more tense with each passing week. Letters arrived. Phone calls came late at night. Amina overheard raised voices, fragments of conversation, payment deadline, don't embarrass me. One evening, Beatrice slammed a plate onto the table and turned toward Amina with a sharp smile. "You're old enough," she said. "People are starting to talk." Amina felt her stomach tighten. "Talk about what?" "About why a grown girl is still eating another woman's food," Beatrice replied. "About whether you think you can stay here forever." Amina lowered her head. "I'm grateful for everything you've done." Beatrice laughed a dry sound. Grateful doesn't pay bills. From that night on, the atmosphere shifted again. Beatrice watched Amina closely, measuring her as though weighing an object for sale. She asked strange questions, whether Amina had ever been promised to anyone, whether any man had shown interest. Amina answered honestly, "No, no one had." That seemed to please Beatrice. Amina tried one last time to change her fate. Without telling Beatrice, she applied for a short vocational program at a women's center across town. The application required a recommendation and a small fee. Amina saved coins secretly, for weeks skipping meals, walking instead of taking buses. The day she received the interview invitation, her hands shook with hope. But hope was fragile. When Amina arrived at the center, the receptionist frowned at her papers. "There's been a call," the woman said gently. "Someone claiming to be your guardian, Beatrice. They said Amina was dishonest, lazy, mentally unstable, a risk. The interview was canceled." Amina walked home slowly, the letter crushed in her fist. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford tears anymore. That evening, Beatrice waited for her in the sitting room. So she said calmly, "You thought you could escape." Amina sank to her knees. Not in submission, but exhaustion. "Please," she whispered. "I just want a chance." Beatrice leaned down, her perfume sharp. "Your chance is coming," she said, "and you will take it." Outside, the city buzzed with life, cars, music, laughter. Somewhere near the market, the crippled beggar adjusted his cane and shifted position as night settled in. Two lives, both unwanted by the world, were being pulled toward the same decision. Neither of them had been told. Beatrice Okoye did not believe in accidents. Everything in her life was a transaction, a calculation, a balance sheet of gain and loss. Even grief had been useful, once useful enough to win sympathy, to stall creditors, to secure favors from relatives who pitied a widow left behind. But sympathy expired quickly. Debts did not. The letters that arrived that month were not polite. They no longer used greetings or soft language. Some were slipped under the gate at night. Others came with phone calls that ended abruptly when Beatrice tried to argue. "You promised," one voice had said coldly. "We are done waiting." Beatrice knew what people like that could do. She had borrowed money not for survival, but for appearances, expensive clothes, social gatherings, business deals she barely understood. She had wanted to be seen as important, respected, untouchable. Now, respect was slipping through her fingers. She sat alone in the sitting room one afternoon. Documents spread across the table. The house felt too quiet. Sad was out with friends. Amina was in the back scrubbing clothes by hand. Beatrice closed her eyes and exhaled sharply. Then, like a thought she had been circling for weeks, the idea settled into place. Marriage. In their community, marriage solved many things. It removed responsibility. It transferred burden. It ended questions. And Amina, quiet, obedient, invisible, was the perfect sacrifice. Beatrice stood and walked to the doorway, watching Amina through the open window. The girl's hands were red from soap and cold water. Her posture was tired, but she worked without complaint. Beatrice felt no guilt, only irritation. "A grown woman," she muttered, "still eating my food." That evening, Beatrice dressed carefully and went out. She told Amina she would be late and did not explain where she was going. Amina nodded as always. Beatrice's destination was not far. She walked toward the market, blending into the crowd. She slowed when she reached the roadside near the bus stop. The crippled beggar was there. Daniel Adeyemi sat in his usual place, his cane resting against his knee. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. A few coins lay in front of him. He wasn't calling out. He never did. Beatrice stopped a short distance away, pretending to check her phone while she observed him. He was exactly what she needed. Poor, alone, broken, no family that anyone spoke of, no ambition that could threaten her, no voice that would argue, a man no one would question. Beatrice approached him deliberately. "You," she said. Daniel looked up slowly. His expression was neutral. "Yes, madam." His voice surprised her. Calm, educated. She ignored the feeling. "I have a proposal," Beatrice said, lowering her voice. "A marriage." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "To you," she scoffed. "Don't be foolish," she explained quickly, impatiently. "A girl, a small ceremony, some money enough to last a while. He would gain a wife. She would gain freedom from responsibility." Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a moment. "And the girl," he asked finally, "does she agree?" Beatrice smiled thinly. "She will." Daniel's eyes held hers for a fraction longer than necessary. Then he looked down. "I am not what people want," he said quietly. "That's exactly why you're perfect," Beatrice replied. "No one will envy her. No one will interfere." She left without waiting for his answer. Back at the house, Amina sensed the change immediately. Beatrice began humming while cooking. She spoke more politely, even offered Amina an extra portion of food. The kindness was unfamiliar, unsettling. 2 days later, Beatrice called Amina into the sitting room. "You're getting married," she said flatly. The words did not register at first. Amina blinked. "Married, yes," Beatrice replied. "It's time." "To who?" Amina asked, her voice barely audible. Beatrice smiled. "A man of good character, humble, God-fearing." Amina's chest tightened. "I don't know anyone." "You don't need to," Beatrice said. "I've chosen." Amina felt the room tilt. "Please," she said. "I'm not ready. I can work. I can—" "You've worked enough," Beatrice snapped. "And you've cost me enough." That night, Amina did not sleep. She thought of her father, of the tailoring shop, of the program she had lost, of the future she had never been allowed to imagine. The next afternoon, Beatrice took her to the market. "Walk properly," she hissed, "and don't embarrass me." They stopped near the bus stop. Amina saw him before Beatrice spoke. The crippled beggar. He was closer than she remembered. His face was lean, his beard trimmed neatly despite his circumstances. His eyes lifted when they approached, and Amina felt something twist in her stomach. "This is him," Beatrice announced. Amina stared. "No," she whispered. "Please, not him." Daniel rose slowly, leaning on his cane. His movements were careful, controlled. "I asked her," he said quietly, looking at Beatrice. "You said she agreed." "She will." Beatrice repeated sharply. Daniel turned to Amina. Up close, his eyes were even more unsettling. They were not empty. They were watchful. You don't have to say yes, he said softly. I won't force you. Amina's throat burned. She looked at Beatrice, who was already scowling. If you walk away, Beatrice said calmly. Don't come back to my house. The street noise faded. Amina felt very small. She nodded once. I agree, she said, though it felt like someone else was speaking. Daniel exhaled slowly. Something unreadable crossed his face. I will do my best not to harm you, he said. Beatrice clapped her hands together, satisfied. Good. Then it's settled. As they walked away, Daniel remained behind for a moment, watching Amina's back. His grip tightened on the cane. This marriage was not a coincidence. It was a trap, and he had stepped into it willingly. The days that followed moved too quickly, as if time itself had decided to side with Beatrice. Word spread through the neighborhood with the efficiency of gossip, sharpened by cruelty. Amina heard it in half-finished sentences at the market in whispers that stopped when she passed. Some women shook their heads with pity. Others smiled as if her misfortune confirmed a lesson they had always believed. So it's true, one voice said behind her. She's marrying that crippled beggar. Amina kept her eyes down and her steps steady. She had learned long ago that responding only fed the fire. Beatrice, on the other hand, enjoyed the attention. She told the story repeatedly, each time polishing it to her liking. She spoke of charity, of giving Amina a chance at a respectable life, of how difficult it was to raise a girl who was so stubborn, so ungrateful. She needs a man who will keep her humble. Beatrice declared to anyone who would listen. At home, the preparations were minimal and humiliating by design. Beatrice bought a cheap dress from a roadside stall. Thin fabric, uneven stitching. She told Amina not to complain. Many women don't even get this, she said. Be grateful. There was no bride price discussion, no celebration of union. Beatrice refused to invite relatives who might ask questions. The wedding would be quick, public, final. Amina tried to speak to Sade, once hoping for a sliver of kindness. I don't want this, she whispered when they were alone. Sade looked at her with mild curiosity, like someone observing an insect. Then don't do it. I can't leave, Amina said. I have nowhere to go. Sade shrugged. That's not my problem. Each night Amina lay awake listening to the city breathe. Car horns in the distance, music drifting from neighboring houses. Life moving forward without her. She thought about running. The idea rose and fell like a weak tide. Run where? With what money? Without documents. Beatrice had ensured every door was locked before Amina even knew she needed a key. On the third day, Beatrice sent Amina on an errand to the market alone. Buy rice and oil, she said, and don't talk to anyone. Amina nodded and left, grateful for the air outside the house. Near the bus stop, she saw Daniel again. He was standing this time leaning heavily on his cane, speaking quietly to an older woman who dropped coins into his hand. When she left, he noticed Amina and paused. She considered walking past him. Fear and shame pulled her feet forward, but something held her back. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Daniel frowned slightly. For what? For this, Amina said, gesturing weakly between them. I didn't choose it. I know, he replied. She studied him more closely than before. His clothes were worn but clean. His hands were steady. There was no smell of alcohol or desperation. Why did you agree? She asked. Daniel looked away, his gaze drifting toward the road. Because sometimes refusing doesn't change the outcome, he said. It only changes who gets hurt. Amina swallowed. I don't have anything to give you. I'm not asking, he said. They stood in silence for a moment. "If you want to leave," Daniel added quietly, "tell me now, I will speak to her." Amina shook her head. "She won't listen." Daniel studied her face as if weighing something unseen. Then he nodded once. "Then we will survive," he said. The word stayed with her as she walked away. Survive. Back at home, Beatrice was waiting, irritation etched into her face. "You took too long," she snapped. "Were you flirting with your future husband?" Amina said nothing. The day before the wedding arrived, with heavy clouds pressing low over the city. The air felt thick, restless. Beatrice summoned a few neighbors early in the morning, insisting the ceremony happen before sunset. She wanted witnesses. She wanted permanence. Amina was dressed and seated in the courtyard, like an object on display. Someone handed her a plastic bouquet. Another woman adjusted her veil roughly. "Lift your head," Beatrice ordered. "You look ashamed." Amina felt ashamed, but not of herself. When Daniel arrived, leaning on his cane, a murmur ran through the crowd. Children giggled. A few men snorted openly. "That's him," someone whispered. "That's what she's marrying." Daniel ignored them. His gaze went straight to Amina. For a brief second, the noise faded. He stood beside her, close enough that she could smell soap on his skin. He kept his posture respectful, his presence calm. The officiant, a distant relative Beatrice had bribed, cleared his throat and rushed through the words. No blessings, no celebration. Just procedure. When Amina was asked if she accepted, her voice trembled. "Yes," she said. When Daniel answered, his voice was firm. "I do." The moment the words were spoken, the crowd reacted not with joy, but with laughter and commentary. "Well, that's settled. She'll regret it. Poor girl." Beatrice smiled broadly, relief flooding her features. It was done. As people dispersed, Daniel turned slightly toward Amina, positioning his body between her and the nearest group of whispering women. It was subtle, intentional, she noticed. That evening, Beatrice wasted no time. "Pack your things," she said coldly. "You don't belong here anymore." Amina stood frozen. "Tonight?" "Of course," Beatrice replied. "What did you expect?" To stay, Amina went to the back room and folded her few belongings, a pair of sandals, 2 dresses, a worn notebook. She touched the walls one last time, unsure why her chest ached. Pain didn't always mean attachment. Sometimes it meant unfinished grief. When she returned, Daniel was waiting outside the gate. Beatrice handed him a small bag of food and coins. "That's all you'll get," she said. "Don't ever come back here." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you." As they walked away, Amina did not look back. They walked in silence through dim streets until they reached a narrow building on the edge of the city. Daniel unlocked the door carefully and stepped aside. "This is where I stay," he said. "You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor." Amina stared at the small room, bare walls, a single bulb, a thin mattress. "This is fine," she said quietly. Daniel set his cane against the wall and moved with practiced ease, arranging the space so she would feel less exposed. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will touch you. No one will force you." Amina sat on the mattress, exhaustion washing over her. For the first time in a long while, no one was shouting at her. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside the small room, 2 strangers sat on opposite sides of a fate neither had truly chosen. And somewhere deep beneath Daniel's calm exterior, a decision was taking shape, one that would eventually change everything. Morning arrived without ceremony. Amina woke to the sound of water pouring into a metal basin. For a moment, confusion held her still. Then memory returned, sharp and undeniable. She was no longer in Beatrice's house. She was married, and the man she had married was washing his face. A few steps away, his back turned to give her privacy. Daniel moved carefully as if each action had been rehearsed to avoid disturbance. When he noticed she was awake, he stepped aside and nodded. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Amina replied, her voice hoarse. He gestured toward the basin. "You can use the water. I'll step outside." She watched him leave his cane, tapping softly against the concrete. The door closed gently behind him. Amina exhaled. She had expected discomfort, fear something darker. Instead, she felt an unfamiliar quiet. No orders, no insults, no demand to hurry. When she finished, Daniel returned with 2 small loaves of bread and a cup of tea. He placed them on the floor between them and sat at a respectful distance. "I don't have much," he said, "but we'll manage." Amina nodded. "Thank you." They ate in silence. Later, Daniel explained the boundaries without hesitation. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Not your body, not your obedience. If you want to leave someday, tell me. I won't stop you." Amina searched his face for mockery or hidden intent. There was none. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Daniel looked away. "Because forcing someone is another kind of violence," he said. "I've seen enough of that." The words lingered. Amina spent the day cleaning the small room, not because she was told to, but because habit clung to her like a second skin. Daniel protested lightly, insisting she rest. She ignored him gently, finding comfort in motion. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel prepared a simple meal. His movements were precise, efficient. Amina noticed that despite his limp, his balance was strong, controlled. "You've done this before," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "Everyone learns something useful." When night fell, he spread a mat on the floor. "You can take the mattress," he said. Amina hesitated. "Your leg, I'll be fine," he replied calmly. She lay awake long after he settled down, listening to his breathing. It was steady, peaceful. For the first time in years, Amina slept without fear of being woken by shouting. The days that followed established a rhythm. Neither of them had planned. Daniel left early each morning, cane in hand, returning near sunset. He never explained where he went. Amina didn't ask. She found small jobs washing clothes, cleaning stalls, helping an older woman sell vegetables. The money was little, but it was hers. Sometimes she brought food home. Daniel accepted it without pride or protest. Beatrice did not stay silent for long. On the 4th day, a neighbor arrived with a message. "Your mother says you owe her," the woman said bluntly, "for raising you, for the wedding." Amina felt her chest tighten. "I don't have anything," the neighbor shrugged. "That's what she says everyone does until she starts talking." That night, Daniel listened quietly as Amina explained. When she finished, he nodded. "She wants control," he said, "not money." "How do you know?" Amina asked. "Because people who want money leave when they're paid," Daniel replied. "People who want power don't." The next morning, Beatrice came herself. She stood outside the door, arms crossed, her expression sharp with triumph when Amina opened it. "So this is where you live now," she said, eyes scanning the room with contempt. "Worse than I imagined." Daniel stepped forward slowly, positioning himself between them. "Good morning," he said politely. Beatrice scoffed. "Don't talk to me. I'm here for her." "She doesn't owe you anything," Daniel replied calmly. Beatrice laughed. "You think you have a say?" Daniel met her gaze. His eyes were steady, unflinching. "She's my wife," he said. "I have a say." For a moment, Beatrice faltered. Then anger surged back. "You should be grateful I gave you a woman at all," she snapped. "You're nothing." Daniel inclined his head slightly. Then you've lost nothing by leaving. The words were simple, controlled, and they landed harder than shouting ever could. Beatrice stared at him, startled by the lack of fear in his posture. Finally she hissed, "This isn't over," and turned away. When she was gone, Amina's hands shook. "I'm sorry," she said. "She'll keep coming." Daniel nodded. "I know." That night, Amina cried quietly, overwhelmed by the weight of everything she had lost and everything she didn't understand. Daniel did not touch her. He simply placed a folded cloth beside her and sat nearby, a silent presence. "You don't have to be strong here," he said. The words broke something open inside her. Weeks passed. Amina began to notice the details she had tried to ignore. Daniel's phone was old, but he used it with familiarity that suggested more than street survival. When he spoke on calls, his tone shifted, still calm but authoritative. He chose his words carefully, sometimes stepping outside before answering. Once she saw a small card fall from his pocket when he removed his coat. It was black, smooth. He picked it up quickly when he noticed her looking. "What is that?" she asked. "Nothing important," he said gently. Amina nodded, but the question remained. One afternoon, as Amina returned from work, she found Daniel standing near the door, speaking quietly to two men she didn't recognize. They were well-dressed, alert. When they noticed her, they straightened instinctively. "Good evening," one of them said respectfully. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I told you not to come here." "We were worried," the man replied. Sir Daniel cut him off with a sharp glance. The men apologized and left quickly. Amina stared at Daniel, heart racing. "Who were they?" she asked. "Friends," he said. "Friends don't look at you like that," she replied softly. Daniel didn't answer. That night Amina lay awake again, but this time her thoughts were different. Fear had been replaced by uncertainty. The man she lived with did not fit the story everyone told about him. The next morning, Amina faced danger herself. While working at the market, a man accused her of stealing money. His voice was loud, angry. People gathered quickly. "I saw her near my stall," he shouted. "Check her bag." Amina froze, panic rising. Before she could speak, Daniel appeared beside her. "Step back," he said calmly. The man sneered. "What will you do?" "Hit me with your stick." Daniel's grip on his cane tightened. His posture shifted. For a brief second, the limp disappeared. "You're mistaken," Daniel said firmly. "If you continue, you'll regret it." The man hesitated, unsettled by the change in his tone. Others murmured. No one came forward with proof. Eventually, the accusation dissolved. As they walked home, Amina's heart pounded. "You move differently," she said. "Back there." Daniel stopped walking. "Amina," he said quietly, "there are things I haven't told you." She met his gaze. "I know." He searched her face. "And you're still here." "Yes," she replied, "because you haven't hurt me." Daniel nodded slowly. That night he did not sleep. He sat in the darkness, the cane resting against the wall, thinking about the lie that was becoming harder to maintain, and the woman whose safety now mattered more than his plan. Somewhere far from that small room, a different world was already stirring. The wedding had been over, but the humiliation lingered like a stain that refused to wash out. By the end of the second week, everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who Amina had married. Children pointed when she passed. Some women whispered prayers under their breath, not for her happiness, but for their own relief that they were not her. She was unlucky, they said. She deserved better. Or maybe this is what happens when a girl has no mother. Amina heard it all. She carried the words the same way she carried water, carefully without spilling her pain where others could see. Daniel noticed. One afternoon, as they walked back from the market, a group of boys began imitating his limp, exaggeratedly laughing as they dragged one leg behind them. "Crippled man," one shouted. "And look, he even found a wife." Amina stopped walking. Heat rushed to her face. Before she could speak, Daniel raised his hand gently. "Keep moving," he said quietly. But she began. "It's not worth it," he added. She obeyed, though every step burned. Behind them, the laughter grew louder, then faded. When they reached home, Amina finally spoke. "How do you stand it?" Daniel leaned his cane against the wall and sat down slowly. "Stand what?" "The way they treat you," she said. "The way they talk." Daniel considered the question. "Because their words don't define me," he said simply. "They describe themselves." Amina stared at him. She had never heard strength spoken so calmly. That night Beatrice struck again. This time she did not come alone. Two men arrived at the door, just after sunset. They were unfamiliar. Their faces hard, their posture confident in a way that made Amina's stomach tighten. "We're looking for the girl," one of them said. "Her mother sent us." Daniel stepped forward immediately. "She doesn't live with her mother anymore." The man smirked. "Then she owes her mother money." "We don't have any," Amina said quietly. The second man laughed. "That's not our problem." Daniel's hand tightened around his cane. His voice remained calm. "Leave." The men exchanged glances. "Careful," the first one said. "You don't want trouble." Daniel met his eyes, unblinking. "You already brought it. Now take it back with you." There was something in his tone, controlled, deliberate, that made the men hesitate. After a tense moment, they stepped back. "This isn't finished," one warned. Daniel nodded. "Nothing ever is." When they were gone, Amina felt her knees weaken. "She's going to destroy us," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "She already tried," he said. "And she failed." "How can you be so sure?" Amina asked. "Because we're still standing," he replied. The following morning, Daniel did something unexpected. "I won't be back early today," he told Amina. "If anyone comes, don't open the door." She nodded. "Are you all right?" He hesitated. "I will be." He left before she could ask more. That day, Amina worked longer than usual, scrubbing floors until her hands ached. She needed the distraction. When she returned home in the late afternoon, the room felt different, tenser, as if something important had passed through. Daniel arrived just before nightfall. He looked exhausted. His shirt was clean, but his shoulders were stiff. He moved more carefully than usual, as though holding something back. "Are you hurt?" Amina asked, alarmed. "No," he said quickly. "Just tired." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. During dinner, he spoke little. When he finally looked up, his gaze lingered on her face. "Amina," he said, "if things become difficult, if you feel unsafe, you can leave." Her chest tightened. "Are you asking me to go?" "No," he said immediately. "I'm giving you a choice." The word choice landed heavily between them. "I didn't have one before," she said. "I know," Daniel replied softly. "That's why you'll always have one here." Amina nodded, her throat too tight to speak. 2 days later, the city tested them again. Amina was returning from work when she heard shouting ahead. A crowd had gathered near the bus stop, the same place Daniel had once sat as a beggar. At the center was Daniel. His cane lay on the ground. A man stood close to him, chest-puffed, shouting accusations. "You think you're clever, pretending to be helpless. You bumped into my car." Daniel's posture was rigid. His jaw was set. "I didn't touch your car," he said calmly. "You're a liar," the man yelled, shoving him hard. Amina screamed. Before she could reach them, something changed. Daniel caught his balance instantly. No stumble, no weakness. His body moved with sudden precision, his hand gripping the man's wrist and twisting just enough to make him cry out. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel released him immediately, stepping back, picking up his cane. "I said I didn't touch your car," he repeated. The man stared at him in shock, then retreated, humiliated by the attention. Amina reached Daniel, her heart pounding. Your leg. It's complicated," he said quietly. They walked home in silence. That night Amina could not sleep. She replayed the scene again and again. The way he moved, the strength he had hidden, the confidence he tried so hard to bury. "You're not what you pretend to be," she said, finally sitting up. Daniel remained on the floor, staring at the ceiling. "I never pretended to be kind," he replied. "That's not what I meant," he sighed. Slowly, he sat up, his cane forgotten beside him. "There are reasons," he said, "and dangers." "Am I one of them?" Amina asked. He turned toward her, his eyes intense. "No," he said. "You're the reason I regret this disguise." The honesty in his voice frightened her more than lies would have. The next morning, a black car passed slowly down their street. Then another and another. Amina watched from the doorway, unease crawling up her spine. "Daniel," she whispered. He was already standing. "That's not for us," he said, though his expression suggested otherwise. Across the city, in a glass building far from the market, noisemen in suits argued around a long table. "Find him," one voice said coldly. "He's been hiding long enough." A name was spoken. Daniel Adeyemi. Back in the small room, Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as if sensing the shift in the air. The world he had tried to escape was closing in, and Amina, unaware of how close she was to the center of it all, felt the first tremor of a storm that would soon break everything open. After the black cars passed, the street returned to its usual noise, but something invisible had shifted. Amina felt it in the way Daniel stood near the door, long after the engines faded, his shoulders squared, his breathing controlled. He did not move like a man waiting for trouble. He moved like a man preparing for it. "Were they looking for you?" she asked carefully. Daniel turned slowly. "I don't know," he said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Amina nodded, the doubt pressed against her chest. She had learned to read what people didn't say. Beatrice had taught her that much. That evening, Daniel changed their routine. He checked the lock twice. He closed the window fully. He placed his cane within reach of the mattress instead of against the wall. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, noticing her watching him. "I'm not," Amina replied. And then after a pause, "I think." Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "Fear isn't always loud," he said. "Sometimes it's practical." They ate quietly. Outside, a generator hummed somewhere down the street. A radio played a love song too cheerful for the night. When Amina lay down, she did not sleep immediately. She listened to Daniel moving softly, arranging things, making sure the small room was secure. No one had ever done that for her before, not without asking for something in return. In the dark, she spoke. "You protect me like this, but you won't tell me why." Daniel stopped moving. "There are truths," he said slowly, "that become dangerous when spoken too early." "To me?" Amina asked. "To anyone," he replied. She accepted that answer, even if it left her restless. The next few days were quieter, but the tension remained. Daniel left earlier than usual and returned later. When Amina asked where he went, he said only, "Taking care of things." She focused on her own work, grateful for the small income that allowed her to buy food without begging. Yet even at the market she noticed changes. A man she had never seen before watched her too closely. Another followed her for a short distance before disappearing into the crowd. "You're imagining it," she told herself. But her instincts, honed by years of watching Beatrice, disagreed. One afternoon, as Amina washed clothes behind the building, she heard footsteps. She turned quickly, heart racing, only to see an elderly woman carrying a basket. "Sorry, my child," the woman said kindly. "I didn't mean to startle you." Amina forced a smile. "It's all right." The woman hesitated. "Your husband," she said quietly. "He is different." Amina stiffened. How the woman leaned closer. "Men like him do not stay poor forever," she said, tapping her temple. "Just be careful." Before Amina could respond, the woman walked away. That night, Amina told Daniel about the encounter. He listened carefully, his face unreadable. "You should stay close to home for a while," he said, "until things settle." "And if they don't?" Amina asked. Daniel met her gaze. "Then we adjust." She studied him. "You speak like someone used to planning." A faint smile touched his lips. Survival requires strategy. Beatrice did not wait for things to settle. She came again, this time alone, her anger sharpened by desperation. Amina opened the door reluctantly. So Beatrice said, stepping inside without invitation, "You still think you've won?" Amina stood her ground. "I just want peace." Beatrice laughed harshly. "Peace is for people who can afford it." Her eyes flicked toward Daniel, who was seated calmly watching her with an expression that unsettled her. "You," Beatrice said, pointing at him. "You think you're clever, hiding behind that stick." Daniel said nothing. "I know people," Beatrice continued. "Important people, and they are asking questions about you." Amina's breath caught. Daniel's voice was steady. "Then answer them." Beatrice sneered. "Careful, you're not untouchable." Daniel rose slowly, his movements controlled. "Neither are you," he said. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Beatrice's smile faltered for just a moment. Then she scoffed and turned to Amina. "You'll come back," she said, "when this fantasy collapses." She left with her head held high, but the unease followed her out. Amina's hands shook after the door closed. "She knows something," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "She suspects," he corrected. "That's different." "Of what?" "Of the truth." That night Daniel made a decision. He waited until Amina had finished eating, then spoke carefully. "I need to tell you part of what's going on," he said. "Not everything, but enough." Amina straightened. "I'm listening." "There are people who want me to be visible," Daniel said, "and others who need me invisible." "Why?" she asked. "Because visibility is power," he replied, "and power makes enemies." Amina absorbed this slowly. "Are you in danger?" "Yes," he said simply. "And me." Daniel did not hesitate. "Only because of me." The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any reassurance. "Then why stay?" Amina asked. "Why not disappear again?" "Because Daniel said," his gaze steady, "disappearing taught me something." "What?" "That hiding protects the body," he said, "but it destroys the soul." Amina felt tears rise unexpectedly. She wiped them away quickly. "I don't need to know everything," she said. "I just need to know if you're using me." Daniel's expression softened. "Never," he said. "I married you to protect you from her, from the world she was pushing you into." "And from yourself?" Amina asked quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe." The following morning, the city did not give them time to breathe. Amina was returning from the market when two men blocked her path. "Madam," one said politely, "we need to speak with you." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "About what your husband," the other replied. Before fear could take over, Daniel appeared beside her. "She's busy," he said calmly. "Speak to me." The men exchanged a glance. Mr. Adeyemi one said carefully, lowering his voice. "You've been difficult to find." Amina froze. Daniel did not. "Then stop looking," he said. The men stepped aside, reluctantly allowing them to pass. As they walked away, Amina's mind raced. "They called you by your name," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, you said it was dangerous to speak the truth too early," she continued. "Is this early?" He stopped walking. "Amina," he said gently, "the truth is already speaking." She met his eyes, searching for fear, arrogance, deceit. She found none, only resolve. In the distance, the city roared on, unaware that the fragile quiet of one small room was about to collide with a much larger world. And for the first time, Amina realized that the man she had been forced to marry was not the weakest person she had ever known. He might be the most powerful. The name followed Amina all the way home. Mr. Adeyemi. She rolled it around in her mind, testing its weight, its meaning. Names had power where she came from. They opened doors or closed them forever. Daniel noticed her silence but did not interrupt it. He unlocked the door, stepped aside for her to enter, then closed it carefully behind them. The familiar room felt smaller than usual, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. "People don't just say names by accident," Amina said at last. Daniel nodded. "No. Then you lied to me," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "I withheld," he corrected. "There's a difference." Amina turned to face him. "Is there?" Daniel held her gaze. "I didn't lie about what mattered," he said. "I told you I would never hurt you." That hasn't changed. She wanted to believe him. She already did in ways that frightened her. "Who are they?" she asked. "The men, the cars, the calls." Daniel exhaled slowly. "People who believe they can decide where I belong." "And where is that?" Amina asked. "Anywhere they can control me," he replied. He did not elaborate, and she sensed he wouldn't not yet. Still, something inside her shifted. The uncertainty no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like a puzzle taking shape. That night, Daniel did not sleep. Amina knew because she didn't either. She lay on the mattress, staring into the dark, listening to the faint sounds of the city. Daniel sat near the door, silent, alert. Every so often he shifted as though checking angles only he could see. "You don't have to watch all night," she said softly. "Yes, I do," he replied. "For me?" she asked. "For us," he corrected. The following days tested Amina's nerves. People at the market began treating her differently. Some avoided her altogether. Others smiled too politely, asking questions that were clearly rehearsed. "Your husband," one woman said casually, "he seems educated." Another added, "Does he really beg? Or is that just a story?" Amina learned to answer without answering. "He's my husband," she said simply. At home, Daniel's absences grew longer. When he returned, there were subtle changes, his clothes pressed more neatly, his posture more guarded. Once, Amina noticed a faint bruise near his wrist. He dismissed it. "Clumsy," he said. She did not argue, but the fear returned sharper now. One afternoon, Beatrice's daughter Sade appeared at the door. She looked around the room with open disdain. "So this is where you ended up." Amina folded her arms. "What do you want?" Sade smirked. "Information." Amina laughed softly, surprising herself. "About what?" "About him," Sade said, lowering her voice. "People are asking questions. Important people." Daniel, who had been standing quietly near the window, turned. "If you came to insult us," he said calmly, You've done it. Now leave. Said raised an eyebrow. You don't talk much for a beggar. Daniel's eyes hardened. I talk enough. Said's gaze flicked between them, calculating. Be careful, she warned Amina. You don't know what you're tied to. Neither do you, Amina replied. Said scoffed and left, but the damage was done. The walls felt thinner again. That evening, Amina confronted Daniel more directly. I don't need every detail, she said, but I need honesty. Are we safe? Daniel considered the question carefully. For now, he said, and later. That depends on choices that haven't been made yet. By who? Amina pressed. By me, Daniel answered, and by people who don't care who gets hurt. Amina sat down heavily. I didn't choose this. No, Daniel said gently. But you didn't choose to be sold either. That's why I won't make choices for you now. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself until they were eye level. If you want to leave, he said quietly, I will arrange it. Somewhere safe. No one will touch you. Amina stared at him. And you, I'll handle what's mine. She felt anger rise unexpected and fierce. You don't get to decide that alone. Daniel blinked. I thought you wanted distance. I want truth, she said. And respect. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then here's the truth, he said. I am not poor, I am not helpless, and I am not free. The words landed heavily. There is a company, Daniel continued, a large one, built by my father. After his death, people close to us decided I was inconvenient. Inconvenient, how Amina asked. Too honest, he replied. Too unwilling to be controlled. So you hid, Amina said. Yes, and pretended to be disabled, she added quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened, partly for protection, partly as a test. Amina's breath caught. A test. To see who would still treat me like a human being, he said. Who would see past weakness, real or assumed. The room was silent. And what am I? Amina asked finally. Daniel did not hesitate. You are the reason the test failed. She frowned. Failed because I stopped observing and started caring, he said. That was never the plan. Amina stood up pacing. So I'm part of an experiment. No, Daniel said quickly. You're the exception. She stopped. Those are not the same thing. Pain flickered across his face. I know. That night, Amina dreamed of doors. Some were locked, some were open. All of them required her to choose which way to walk. When she woke, Daniel was gone. Panic surged through her. She rushed outside, scanning the street. Nothing. Then she noticed the envelope on the table. Inside was money more than she had ever held, and a note written in careful handwriting. If I don't come back tonight, go to this address. They will help you. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Her hands trembled. For the first time since the forced marriage, Amina felt truly afraid not of Daniel, but for him. Hours passed. The sun climbed, then began to fall. Amina paced, heart racing at every sound. Just as darkness settled, the door opened. Daniel stepped inside, breathing hard, his face drawn. What happened? Amina demanded. He leaned against the wall, exhausted. They tried to take control, he said. I refused. Who? She asked. Victor Adeyemi, Daniel replied. My uncle. The name meant nothing to Amina, but the tension in Daniel's voice did. He wants the company, Daniel continued. And he's tired of waiting. Amina swallowed. What does that mean for us? Daniel met her eyes. It means the disguise won't protect us much longer. Silence fell between them. Amina walked to the table, picked up the envelope and placed it back in front of him. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Daniel stared at her. Amina, I didn't choose this life, she interrupted. But I'm choosing you. On one condition, what he asked. No more half-truths, she said. If danger is coming, I face it with my eyes open. Daniel nodded slowly. Then stay close, he said. Things are about to move fast. Outside the city, lights flickered on, unaware that a quiet war had just shifted direction. And Amina, once a girl without choices, stood at the edge of a truth, powerful enough to shatter everything she thought she knew. Danger did not arrive with sirens or shouting. It came quietly, disguised as routine. The morning after Daniel named his uncle, the city looked unchanged. Vendors shouted prices. Motorbikes weaved through traffic. Children chased one another through narrow streets. If Amina had not known better, she might have believed the storm had passed. But Daniel knew. He woke early, checked his phone, and erased messages before she could ask about them. He moved with a new urgency, a precision that made Amina's chest tighten. "We'll change our route today," he said as they prepared to leave. "No market." Amina frowned. "Then where will we get food?" Daniel hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Trust me." She nodded, though unease followed her out the door. They walked farther than usual through streets Amina rarely visited. Daniel chose turns instinctively, avoiding crowds watching reflections in shop windows. Once, he stopped abruptly, pulling Amina back, just as a car rolled past, too slowly. "Do you recognize it?" she whispered. "No," Daniel said, "which is worse." They reached a small cafe tucked between taller buildings. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. A man behind the counter nodded at Daniel with a familiarity that startled Amina. "You're late," the man said. Daniel ignored the comment. "2 meals, takeaway." As they waited, Amina leaned closer. "You've been here before." "Yes," Daniel said. "A long time ago." The food arrived quickly, paid for without discussion. As they left, Amina glanced back. The man behind the counter was watching them with concern, not curiosity. "Who was that?" she asked. "Someone who owes my father," Daniel replied, "and still feels it." They walked home in silence. By midday, the tension became impossible to ignore. Amina tried to distract herself by cleaning, organizing the few belongings they owned. Her hands moved automatically while her mind replayed Daniel's words from the night before. "The disguise won't protect us much longer." She wondered what protection even meant now. A locked door, a cane silence. When a knock sounded in the early afternoon, her heart jumped into her throat. Daniel was at the door instantly. "Stay back," he murmured. The knock came again, firm, polite. Daniel opened the door, just enough to see who stood outside. A well-dressed woman smiled brightly. Too brightly. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm looking for Daniel Adeyemi." Amina felt the air leave her lungs. Daniel did not flinch. "You've found him." The woman's smile widened. "Excellent. My name is Nkiru. I represent Victor Adeyemi." Daniel stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Amina moved closer, pressing her ear to the thin wall. "We prefer to talk privately," the woman continued. "Your uncle is concerned about your well-being." "My well-being has never concerned him," Daniel replied coolly. Nkiru sighed. "Daniel, you're making this difficult. The board is restless. Investors are nervous. You disappearing like this, it's bad for business." "I didn't disappear," Danielle said. "I stepped away." "You don't step away from something you own," Nkiru countered. "You abandoned it." "Victor stepped in to keep things running." Daniel laughed softly. "By draining accounts and rewriting contracts." There was a pause. "You have no proof," Nkiru said. "I have plenty," Daniel replied. "Just not where you can reach it." Another pause, longer this time. "You can come back quietly," Nkiru said. "Resume your position. Keep your personal life discreet." or you can force our hand." "And what does that look like?" Daniel asked. Nkiru's voice dropped. "Accidents happen, especially to people living on the edge." Amina's blood ran cold. Daniel's response was calm. "Threats won't work. They usually do," Nkiru replied. Daniel stepped closer to her. "Then you've underestimated me." When the door opened again, Daniel's face was hard-controlled. "She knows where we live," Amina whispered. "Yes," he said, "which means it's time to move." They left that night. Daniel packed only essentials, handing Amina a small bag. "Where are we going?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Somewhere safer," he replied. "For now." They traveled by bus, then by taxi, changing vehicles more times than Amina could count. Daniel paid in cash, avoided eye contact, spoke only when necessary. By the time they reached their destination, it was past midnight. The building was unremarkable, nestled among others like it. Daniel knocked in a specific pattern. The door opened almost immediately. A tall man stepped aside. "We've been expecting you." Inside the space was clean, sparse, secure. "This is temporary," Daniel explained to Amina. "People here can be trusted." She nodded, exhaustion pulling at her bones. As she lay down, sleep came quickly, but it did not last. Amina woke to shouting. Her heart slammed as she sat up listening. Voices echoed from outside the building, angry, insistent. She rushed to the door just as Daniel grabbed her arm. "Don't!" he whispered. A crash sounded downstairs. Footsteps thundered. Someone screamed. Daniel swore under his breath. "They're early," he said. "Victor doesn't like waiting." Amina's fear sharpened into something else. Anger. "You said we were safe," she whispered. "For now," Daniel replied. "Which is all anyone ever gets." The door burst open. 3 men stormed in their movements, aggressive, confident. One of them raised a weapon. "Not a gun, but enough." "Daniel Adeyemi," the man said. "You're coming with us." Amina stepped forward instinctively. "You can't just take him." The man laughed. "Watch us." Daniel moved, then fast, precise. He shoved Amina behind him, knocking the first man off balance, twisting another's arm with practiced efficiency. The room erupted into chaos. Amina screamed as a third man lunged. Daniel intercepted him. His cane discarded his body, moving with shocking power. Within seconds, 2 men were down, groaning. The third hesitated. "Get out!" Daniel growled. The man ran. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing. Amina stared at Daniel, her hands shaking. "You're not disabled," she said, the truth undeniable now. Daniel wiped blood from his lip. "No." Then why? She stopped, overwhelmed. "We'll talk later," he said. "We have to leave. Now." They fled again, this time with no destination in mind. By dawn, they were hiding in an abandoned clinic on the outskirts of the city. The building smelled of dust and old disinfectant. Sunlight filtered weakly through cracked windows. Amina sank onto a bench, trembling. "They would have killed you," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said, "and used your fear to control me." Amina looked up sharply. "You think they wouldn't hurt me?" Daniel met her gaze. "That's exactly why they would." The realization settled heavily between them. "So what happens now?" she asked. Daniel leaned against the wall, exhaustion etched into his face. "Now I stop running," Amina swallowed. "And me." Daniel hesitated, then spoke with quiet intensity. "Now you decide." She stood slowly, every part of her aching, every instinct screaming for safety. "I've spent my life being dragged," she said, "from one place to another, from one decision to the next." Daniel listened, silent. "I won't be dragged again," she continued, "but I won't abandon you either." Daniel's eyes softened. Amina, if you're going to face them, she said, you don't do it alone. Not because I owe you, because I choose you. Emotion flickered across Daniel's face, relief, fear, gratitude, all at once. Then we prepare, he said. Outside the city woke unaware of the reckoning forming in its shadows. And for the first time since her forced marriage, Amina felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. Morning light crept into the abandoned clinic like an apology. Amina sat on a metal bench, arms wrapped around herself, watching dust float in the air. Her body ached from the night's flight, but it was nothing compared to the weight pressing on her chest. Fear had changed shape. It was no longer loud or panicked. It was sharp, focused, demanding decisions. Daniel stood near the doorway, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones. She couldn't hear the words, but she recognized the posture, the careful stillness of someone negotiating power. When he ended the call, he turned toward her. "We have a few hours," he said, "before they try again." Amina nodded. "A few hours to do what?" "To prepare," Daniel replied. "And to talk." He moved closer, lowering himself onto a chair opposite her. Without the cane, without the performance of fragility, he looked different, broader, somehow more grounded. Not intimidating, but unmistakably capable. "I owe you the rest of the truth," he said. Amina met his gaze. "You owe me honesty," she corrected. "Nothing more." He accepted that with a slight nod. "My father built the company from nothing," Daniel began. "He believed in transparency, fair wages, accountability. That made him enemies long before he died." Amina listened silent. "After his death, my uncle Victor stepped in." Daniel continued. "He knew the system better than my father ever did. He knew how to bend it. And when I refused to follow, he decided I was a problem." "So you ran," Amina said. "Yes," Daniel admitted. "At first to protect myself, then to see who would still treat me like a human being when I had nothing to offer." "And me?" Amina asked softly. Daniel did not look away. "You were never part of the test." Amina held his gaze, searching for hesitation, finding none. "You didn't see a beggar," he continued. "You saw a person, even when you were afraid, even when you had every reason to walk away." Amina's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything special." "You did," Daniel said quietly. "You didn't look at me with disgust or pity. You looked at me like I mattered." Silence stretched between them. Amina exhaled slowly, and the limp Daniel grimaced. "Real injury. Years ago. But not permanent. I let people believe it was worse than it was." Amina absorbed that. "You let the world underestimate you." "Yes," he said. "It's safer that way." "Not for me," she replied. Daniel nodded. "I know." They spent the next hours planning. Daniel contacted a handful of people he trusted, former employees. Loyal to his father, a lawyer who had quietly preserved documents, a security specialist who owed Daniel his career. Each call was brief, coded, purposeful. Amina watched, absorbing more than she realized. This was not the chaos of someone cornered. This was the calm of someone preparing to reclaim ground. "What do you need from me?" she asked eventually. Daniel hesitated. Truthfully, yes. Nothing, he said, except to stay safe. Amina frowned. "That's not an answer." He smiled faintly. "I need you to be honest with yourself about whether you want to keep walking beside me." Amina thought of Beatrice's house, of being sold, of being silenced. "I've walked beside danger my whole life," she said. "At least this time it's honest." Daniel studied her face, then nodded. "All right." By midday they moved again, this time with purpose. A trusted driver picked them up in an unmarked car. taking them to a modest apartment on the edge of the business district. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Inside, it was secure. "This is where you'll stay," Daniel said to Amina. "There are guards. No one gets in without clearance." "And you?" she asked. "I'll be in and out," he replied. "There's work to do." Amina caught his arm. "Don't disappear. I won't," he promised. When he left, the apartment felt unnaturally quiet. Amina explored the space slowly. Clean rooms, simple furniture, a view of the city that reminded her how small her old world had been. She stood at the window for a long time, watching people move below, each carrying their own battles unseen. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by survival. That illusion shattered in the afternoon. The doorbell rang. Amina froze. She had been told no one would come without notice. The bell rang again. She moved cautiously, checking the screen near the door. Her heart dropped. Beatrice. The guards were there, but Beatrice was shouting, making a scene. Neighbors were already watching. "I know she's here," Beatrice yelled. "She belongs to me." Amina's hands trembled. "Madam," a guard said calmly, "you need to leave." I raised her. Beatrice screamed. "I have rights." Amina stepped forward before fear could stop her. She opened the door. Beatrice's eyes lit up triumphantly. "There you are," she said. "Hiding behind money already." Amina stood straight. "I'm not hiding." Beatrice scoffed. "You think that man will save you? He'll throw you away when he's done." Amina felt anger rise, not hot and wild, but cold and steady. "You already threw me away," she said. "I survived." Beatrice's smile faltered. "Come home," Beatrice demanded. "Before things get ugly." "They already did," Amina replied. "You made sure of that." Beatrice's voice dropped. "You owe me." Amina shook her head. "No, you took everything you could, and you would have taken more." For a moment, something like panic flickered in Beatrice's eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. "It is, for me," Amina said. The guards escorted Beatrice away as she shouted curses, her dignity unraveling in front of strangers. Amina closed the door, her body shaking. She sank onto the floor, breathing hard. When Daniel returned that evening, he found her there. He knelt beside her instantly. "What happened?" she came. Amina said. I told her no. Daniel's expression softened. "I'm proud of you." The words surprised her. They warmed something deep inside. I was terrified, she admitted. "You still stood," he said. "That's courage." Night fell heavy and quiet. Daniel sat across from Amina at the small table, papers spread out before him. Contracts, financial records, evidence. "They're going to push back hard," he said. "Victor won't give up control easily." Amina nodded. "Neither will she." Daniel met her gaze. "I won't let them touch you." Amina leaned forward. "I don't want protection that costs me my voice." He considered that carefully. "Then stand with me, publicly." Her heart skipped. "Publicly, how there will be a board meeting," Daniel said. "Soon, if I walk in alone, they'll say I manipulated you. If you stand beside me, they can't erase you." Amina swallowed. "They'll tear me apart." "They'll try," Daniel agreed, "but they'll have to do it in the light." She thought of the market, the whispers, the wedding laughter. "I'm tired of darkness," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we faced them together. Outside, the city lights flickered on, indifferent to the choices being made within its walls. Inside the apartment, Amina, once a girl with no future of her own, sat across from a man preparing to reclaim his name. And for the first time, she did not feel like a burden. She felt like a witness. The boardroom was larger than Amina expected. Glass walls framed a city that seemed impossibly distant, as if life continued elsewhere while decisions inside this room could quietly destroy it. The table stretched long and polished, surrounded by high-backed chairs already occupied by men and women in tailored suits. Conversations hummed in low, controlled tones. Daniel walked beside her, his pace steady, his posture unmistakably confident. No cane, no limp. Every head turned when they entered. Amina felt the weight of those gazes like heat on her skin. She straightened instinctively, reminding herself why she was there. Not as decoration, not as evidence, as a voice. Victor Adeyemi sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, expression mild. He looked nothing like the threat Daniel had described. No sharp edges, no raised voice. Power, Amina realized, often wore the calmest face. Daniel, Victor said warmly. "You finally decided to come home." Daniel stopped beside an empty chair but did not sit. "I never left," he replied. "You just locked the doors." A ripple of unease moved through the room. Victor's gaze slid to Amina. "And you are," before Daniel could answer, Amina spoke. "Amina Okoye," she said clearly. "Daniel's wife." Silence fell. Victor smiled thinly. "Interesting." Daniel pulled out a chair for her, then took his own. He placed a folder on the table, his movements precise. "You called this meeting to discuss stability," Daniel said. "Let's begin there." Victor chuckled softly. "Stability requires unity and trust," which is why Daniel replied, "You rerouted company funds through shell accounts." Murmur spread. Victor's smile did not falter. "Accusations are dangerous, Daniel." "So is theft," Daniel said calmly. He slid the folder forward. Documents spilled out, bank records, signed approvals, timelines. Faces around the table tightened as people leaned in. "These were safeguarded by counsel." "You tried to fire," Daniel continued. "I suspected why." Victor leaned back, assessing. "You disappear for months," he said, "pretend to be someone you're not, and return expecting applause." "I returned expecting honesty," Daniel replied, "from people paid to protect this company." Victor's gaze sharpened. "And this woman?" he asked, gesturing toward Amina. "She's part of your strategy." Amina felt anger rise but kept her voice steady. "I'm not a strategy," she said. "I'm a consequence." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Of what?" "Of what happens," Amina continued, "when powerful people assume silence means consent." A few heads turned toward her, surprised. Victor smiled indulgently. "You should let the men speak." Amina did not flinch. "You should stop pretending gender decides truth." The room stilled. Daniel watched her with quiet pride. Victor tapped the table lightly. "This is not relevant." "It is," Daniel said. "You underestimated her the same way you underestimated everyone who wouldn't bend." Victor's voice cooled. "Careful." Daniel leaned forward. "I am." He clicked a remote. The screen behind him lit up with images. Contracts altered, signatures forged, timelines exposed. Gasps punctuated the quiet. "You used my absence to consolidate power," Daniel said. "You threatened employees, you bribed auditors, and when I refused to return on your terms, you escalated." Victor's jaw tightened. "You have no proof of coercion." Amina stood. "I do," she said. Every eye turned to her. She took a breath. "You sent people to my home," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Men who threatened us. You tried to take my husband by force. You tried to scare me into silence." Victor laughed softly. "This is absurd." "It's documented," Daniel said. "Time-stamped, recorded." He placed another device on the table. The room erupted. Victor rose abruptly. "This is a setup." Daniel stood as well. "It's an accounting." Security shifted near the doors. Amina's heart pounded, but she did not sit. "You sold a story," she said, turning to the room. "That Daniel abandoned you, that he was unstable, that he couldn't be trusted." She looked from face to face. "Ask yourselves who benefited." The answer hung unspoken. Victor's composure cracked. "You think the board will side with you?" He snapped at Daniel. "You humiliated them by hiding." Daniel's reply was quiet. "I hid to survive. You hid to steal. A beat." Then one board member cleared her throat. "We need a recess." Victor shook his head sharply. "No." Another voice followed. "Yes." Security stepped closer to Victor. "This meeting is adjourned," the chairperson said firmly. "Pending investigation." Victor stared at Daniel, fury naked now. "This isn't over." Daniel met his gaze. "It is for you." The press gathered quickly. Cameras flashed as Daniel and Amina exited the building. Questions flew, voices overlapping. "Is it true you were living as a beggar? Did you deceive your wife?" Amina stepped forward before Daniel could answer. "My husband hid to protect himself," she said. "He didn't hide from me." "And you," a reporter asked. "Why stand with him?" Amina held the microphone's gaze. "Because truth doesn't need permission." Daniel placed a hand lightly at her back. "Not to guide, to stand with." Inside the building, Victor watched from a window, his face rigid. That night they returned to the apartment, exhausted. Amina sank onto the couch. Emotions crashing all at once, relief, fear, disbelief. "It's not finished," Daniel said quietly. "He'll retaliate." Amina nodded. "So will she." As if summoned by the thought, Daniel's phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. "You think you've won. You forget who taught you fear." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "He's desperate. Desperate people are dangerous," Amina said. Daniel looked at her. "I won't let them use you." Amina met his gaze. "They won't." The next day, the counterattack began. Blogs published half-truths. Headlines questioned Daniel's stability. Anonymous sources suggested Amina was paid, manipulated, coerced. Amina read them all. She felt the old familiar shame try to rise, then she shut it down. "They don't know me," she said. Daniel watched her closely. "You don't have to read that." "I do," she replied, "because hiding gave them power once. It won't again." That afternoon, Beatrice appeared on television. Amina froze as the screen filled with her stepmother's face, eyes wet, voice trembling. "I tried to protect my daughter," Beatrice said. "She was manipulated by a dangerous man. I fear for her life." Amina felt something break, not inside her, but away from her. "She's lying," she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know. She's using my pain," Amina said. Again. Daniel took her hands. "Then we stop her." "How?" Amina asked. Daniel's eyes were steady. "By telling the whole story." Amina inhaled deeply. "All of it," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Only the truth survives daylight." They stood together in the quiet apartment, the city murmuring beyond the glass. The war was no longer hidden, and Amina, once erased, once traded, was no longer invisible. She was ready. The truth did not come gently. It arrived in wave screens, lighting up phones, buzzing voices, rising across platforms that had never known Amina's name until now. Daniel's world, once sealed behind glass walls and legal language, had cracked open. And through that opening, Beatrice pushed herself forward, with practiced ease. Amina watched the interview again, though it made her chest ache. Beatrice sat beneath studio lights, dressed modestly, hands folded as if in prayer. She spoke of sacrifice, of raising a child who was not her own, of fear for a daughter lost to manipulation. I tried to stop it, Beatrice said, her voice trembling just enough. But he's powerful, and she's always been weak. The words struck like a slap. Amina turned off the television. She knows exactly what she's doing, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. She's reframing the narrative, making herself the victim, and me the fool, Amina added. Daniel moved closer. You don't have to respond. Amina shook her head. If I stay silent, she wins. Daniel studied her carefully. Once you speak, there's no taking it back. I know, Amina said, but I've lived my whole life erased. I won't let her erase me again. They sat at the table, papers spread between them. Not financial records this time, but something more intimate. School certificates, letters from neighbors, messages Amina had saved over the years. Evidence of a life lived under quiet abuse. You don't owe the world your pain, Daniel said gently. I'm not giving them pain, Amina replied. I'm giving them truth. The decision changed everything. Within hours, a date was set for a public hearing part, legal proceeding part inquiry. Victor's actions would be examined. So would Daniel's disappearance. And at Beatrice's insistence, Amina's marriage. It's a circus, Daniel muttered as they prepared. Amina adjusted her jacket, smoothing invisible wrinkles. Then I'll stand in the center and make them listen. The building was already crowded when they arrived. Cameras, reporters, strangers hungry for spectacle. Inside the room felt colder than the boardroom had. More official, less forgiving. Beatrice sat across the aisle, eyes fixed forward. She did not look at Amina. When Amina's name was called, her heart pounded, but her steps were steady. She took the stand. State your relationship to Daniel Adeyemi, the examiner said. Amina met his gaze. I am his wife. And how did this marriage come about? Amina inhaled. I was forced. A murmur rippled through the room. Beatrice's head snapped up. Amina continued, voice clear. After my father died, my stepmother controlled my documents, my finances, my movements. When I tried to leave, she threatened me with homelessness. The marriage was not a choice. It was an ultimatum. Beatrice stood, abruptly. That's a lie, sit down, the chairperson ordered. Amina did not look at her. I agreed because I was afraid, she said. Not because I wanted to, and Daniel the examiner asked, did he coerce you? No, Amina said immediately. He did the opposite. She described the boundaries, the safety, the refusal to touch her without consent, the protection from Beatrice's harassment. He married me to stop her, Amina said. Not to hone me, Beatrice laughed bitterly. You expect us to believe that, Amina turned, then finally meeting her stepmother's eyes. You taught me how to endure, she said. You never taught me how to lie. Silence fell. The examiner nodded slowly. Do you have evidence of coercion? Amina reached into her bag and placed documents on the table. Messages, witness statements, records of threats, and testimony from neighbors. Beatrice's composure began to fracture. When Daniel was called, the contrast was stark. He spoke of the company, of Victor's manipulation, of the threats, of choosing obscurity to survive. He did not dramatize. He did not defend his disguise beyond necessity. I regret the deception, he said plainly, especially where Amina is concerned. Amina felt a tightening in her chest. I should have told her sooner, Daniel continued, but I never used her. I protected her. And the marriage the examiner pressed. Daniel turned slightly toward Amina. It began under coercion, he said. It continued by choice. Beatrice scoffed. Her choice. She's dependent on you, Amina stood without being prompted. I am not dependent, she said. I am informed. The chairperson raised a hand. Enough. Outside, the crowd waited. As Daniel and Amina emerged, questions flew. Was the marriage real or staged? Is this a publicity move? Amina stepped forward. It was real, she said, and it was complicated. The honesty caught people off guard. I didn't marry a CEO, Amina continued. I married a man who gave me safety when I had none. Do you love him? Someone shouted. Amina paused. Yes, she said. But love isn't the story you want. Dignity is. That night the internet exploded. Some praised her courage. Others doubted her motives. Many dissected her words as if they were currency. Amina read none of it. She sat on the apartment balcony watching the city breathe. Daniel joined her quietly. You were incredible. I was terrified, she admitted. He smiled faintly. So was I. They sat in silence for a while. Do you regret it? Daniel asked eventually. Speaking publicly, Amina considered the question, thought of Beatrice's face, of the years of silence. No, she said. I regret not speaking sooner. Daniel nodded. There's one more thing you should know. Amina turned to him. Victor won't stop, Daniel said. He's already filed motions. He'll try to discredit you. Amina's jaw tightened. Let him. There's also a choice, Daniel continued. If this becomes too much, I can step aside, publicly, end the marriage, take the heat myself. Amina stared at him. You think that would protect me? It might, he said. Amina shook her head. I didn't choose you because you're strong, she said. I chose you because you stood when it mattered. She reached for his hand. If we end this, it's because we choose to, not because they push us. Emotion flickered across Daniel's face. He squeezed her hand gently. 2 days later, the ruling came. An investigation would proceed against Victor. Beatrice would be charged with coercion and financial abuse pending further review. Amina felt no triumph, only a strange, quiet relief. She'll never admit it, Amina said. Daniel nodded. Some people can't. What happens now? She asked. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. Now he said we decide who we are without pressure. Amina smiled faintly. I've never had that. Neither have I, he admitted. Outside the city continued its relentless rhythm, traffic, voices, lives unfolding. Inside, 2 people sat together at the edge of something fragile and new. The truth had been spoken, but the consequences were only beginning. The backlash came dressed as progress. Headlines spoke of investigations and accountability, but beneath the surface, Victor Adeyemi moved with ruthless precision. Motions were filed, appeals drafted, allies activated. He knew how to turn time itself into a weapon delay, long enough exhaust the opposition. Let public attention drift elsewhere. Daniel felt it immediately. Meetings were postponed pending review. Accounts were frozen for verification. Loyal executives were questioned, then quietly sidelined. Victor did not rage. He recalibrated. He's trying to starve us out, Daniel said one evening, pacing the apartment. Not financially, structurally. Amina listened, absorbing the strategy like a second language she had always known but never been taught. He wants you isolated, she said, so the narrative collapses. Daniel nodded. And he wants you to disappear. As if summoned by the thought, Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. If you care about your wife. End this now. Amina read it over his shoulder. Her jaw tightened. He's escalating. Yes, Daniel said, and he won't stop at words. They adjusted their routines again. Guards doubled. Routes changed daily. Amina stopped going out alone. The apartment, once a refuge, began to feel like a holding cell. One night the power cut out without warning. Darkness swallowed the room. Amina's heart raced. Daniel moved instantly, pulling her close, guiding her toward the interior wall. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Footsteps echoed outside the door, slow, deliberate. Someone tested the handle. Once, twice. Then a voice spoke softly. "Daniel, we just want to talk." "Victor." Daniel's grip tightened. "You don't get to talk," he said evenly. "You forfeited that." A soft chuckle answered. "You always were dramatic." The footsteps retreated. The power returned moments later. Amina exhaled shakily. "He wanted us afraid." Daniel nodded. Fear is his favorite currency. The next morning brought another blow. Amina's name trended online, twisted stories framing her as an opportunist, a paid actress, a pawn. Old photos were dug up, captions rewritten. Lies multiplied faster than truth could correct them. Daniel watched her scroll, his chest tight. "You don't have to read that." "I do," Amina said quietly. "Because they're trying to rewrite me." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "Then let's answer them," Daniel said. Together, they arranged a single interview. No spectacle, no panel, just facts. When the camera turned on, Amina spoke plainly. "I was poor," she said. "I was controlled. I was sold. None of that makes me weak. It makes me honest." The clip went viral. Support followed, but so did threats. That night, Daniel received a call from his security lead. "Sir, we intercepted chatter. There's a plan." Daniel closed his eyes. "How soon?" "Within 48 hours, to do what Amina asked." "Force a choice," Daniel replied. "Me or you?" Silence filled the room. Amina stood pacing. "He's going to try to take me." "Yes," Daniel said, "because he knows I won't bend for myself." Amina stopped in front of him. "Then we don't give him the leverage." Daniel's heart sank. "No, I'm not running," she said, "but I'm not hiding either." "Amina," she raised a hand. "Listen, he wants control in the shadows, so we step into the light." Daniel stared at her. "Publicly." "Yes," she said. "We announce the next move, the hearing date, the evidence, everything." "That paints a target on you," Daniel said. "It already exists," Amina replied. "At least this way he can't pretend." Daniel wrestled with the choice, the instinct to shield her, warring with the respect he had learned to give her. "All right," he said finally. "But we do it safely." Victor made his move sooner than expected. Amina was leaving the building with 2 guards when a crowd surged, shouts, phones raised, bodies pressing close. In the confusion, a hand grabbed her arm. Now a voice hissed. Before panic could take hold, Daniel burst through, shoving between bodies, pulling Amina free. Guards formed a barrier. Sirens wailed. The attempt failed, but the message was clear. Victor wanted the world to know he could reach them. That night, Amina shook as adrenaline drained away. Daniel held her without words, his jaw clenched, anger coiled tight. "This ends now," Daniel said. How Amina asked. "With proof Victor can't bury," Daniel replied. "And witnesses he can't silence." They worked through the night. Emails, recordings, contracts, timelines. Amina helped organize testimony names, dates, patterns. She saw the architecture of abuse for what it was, not chaos, but design. At dawn, Daniel looked at her, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You don't have to be at the hearing." Amina met his gaze. "Yes, I do." The day before the hearing, Beatrice resurfaced. She arrived unannounced at the building entrance, flanked by a small group of supporters holding signs about family values and protecting women. Amina watched from the window, her stomach tight. Daniel touched her shoulder. "You don't owe her anything." "I owe myself," Amina said. She went down, Beatrice's face lit with practiced sorrow. "My child," she said loudly, "come home." Amina stood still. "I don't have one," she said. "Not with you." Beatrice's voice trembled. "I fed you. I clothed you. You controlled me," Amina replied. "You sold me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Beatrice shook her head. Tears ready. "She's confused." Amina lifted her chin. "No, I'm clear." She turned to the cameras. "Abuse doesn't need bruises to be real. Control is violence. Silence is not consent." Beatrice's mask slipped just for a second. That was enough. The hearing began under intense scrutiny. Victor arrived composed, flanked by lawyers. Daniel and Amina entered together, hands briefly clasped, then released equals. Evidence unfolded methodically. Patterns emerged. Testimony aligned. When Victor took the stand, his confidence faltered for the first time. "You deny directing intimidation?" the examiner asked. Victor hesitated. "I deny wrongdoing." A recording played Victor's voice unmistakable. "Accidents happen." The room stilled. Amina watched his face harden into something like resignation. By afternoon, the outcome was clear. Charges would proceed, assets frozen, an injunction issued. Victor stood, fury blazing. "This isn't finished," he snapped. Daniel met his gaze. "For you," he said calmly, "it is." That evening, as they returned to the apartment, exhaustion settled heavy and deep. Amina sank onto the couch, tears finally spilling, not of fear of release. "I'm tired," she whispered. Daniel sat beside her. "Me too." "Do you regret this?" she asked. "No," he said without hesitation. "Do you?" Amina shook her head. "I regret the years before." Daniel took her hand. "Then let's build something better." Outside, the city breathed, unaware of the quiet turning point within those walls. The storm had not fully passed, but its center had shifted, and for the first time, Amina felt the ground beneath her feet was solid enough to stand. The courthouse steps were already crowded when dawn broke. Cameras lined the barricades, their lenses fixed on the wide glass doors, as if the building itself might confess before anyone spoke. Police presence was heavier than usual. Security moved with rehearsed precision. The city had learned to expect drama where power was being challenged. Amina stood just inside the entrance, fingers interlaced, breathing slow and measured. She wore a simple dark suit, nothing expensive, nothing symbolic. She had chosen it because it felt honest. Daniel stood beside her, composed but alert. He scanned the room, not with fear but with calculation. This was not the first battle he had prepared for, but it was the first where he refused to hide. "Once we walk in," Daniel said quietly, "there's no controlling how it ends." Amina nodded. "I'm done trying to control outcomes. I'm here to tell the truth." They stepped forward together. Inside, the courtroom was colder than expected. The air conditioning hummed steadily, indifferent to the lives about to be rearranged. Victor Adeyemi sat at the defense table, flanked by lawyers who looked less confident than they had days earlier. His posture was rigid, his jaw clenched. The mask of composure he favored had thinned. Beatrice sat several rows back, dressed in black eyes, red as if from crying or rehearsing it. She avoided Amina's gaze. When proceedings began, the judge's voice cut through the murmurs with authority. The charges were read, the evidence outlined. The room listened. Witnesses followed one by one. A former auditor described pressure to sign off on altered books. An ex-assistant spoke of threats delivered politely, with smiles that promised consequences. A security contractor detailed instructions to apply fear without fingerprints. Each testimony tightened the net. Victor's attorneys objected, deflected, attempted to sow doubt. But the pattern was too clear, the corroboration too precise. What had once looked like isolated incidents now revealed a system built on intimidation. Then Amina's name was called. She rose, steadying herself, and walked to the stand. The oath felt heavier than words. "Please state your relationship to the defendants," the prosecutor said. "My relationship to Victor Adeyemi is adversarial," Amina replied calmly. "My relationship to Daniel Adeyemi is marital." A ripple moved through the room. "Tell the court why you are here," the prosecutor continued. Amina inhaled. "Because power tried to silence me," she said, "and because silence almost worked." She spoke of Beatrice's controlled documents, withheld opportunities, sabotaged the forced marriage framed as mercy. She spoke of fear disguised as obedience, of survival mistaken for consent. "Abuse doesn't always bruise the skin," Amina said. "Sometimes it rearranges the future so quietly that you don't realize what you've lost until someone gives you a choice." She described the night men came to their door, the message sent to Daniel, the attempted abduction amid a crowd, the way intimidation escalated when exposure threatened control. Throughout her testimony, Beatrice shifted in her seat, breath quickening. When the prosecutor finished, Victor's attorney rose. "Ms. Okoye," he said smoothly, "isn't it true you benefited from Mr. Adeyemi's wealth?" Amina met his gaze. "I benefited from safety," she replied. "Wealth didn't give me that. Integrity did." A murmur spread. "And isn't it true," the attorney pressed, "that you agreed to this marriage?" "Yes," Amina said, "under duress." "How can the court verify that?" Amina turned slightly, eyes steady. "Because the man I married refused to use that agreement to control me. Because the woman who forced it threatened me when I tried to leave. And because I am here speaking openly while she hid behind my silence." The attorney paused, recalibrating. No further questions. When Daniel took the stand, the contrast was stark. He did not dramatize his disguise. He explained it calculated, imperfect, chosen, in fear and strategy. He admitted fault where it belonged. "I regret deceiving the public," Daniel said. "I regret deceiving my wife, but I do not regret stepping away from a system that rewarded cruelty." The judge listened closely. "Why return now?" she asked. "Because hiding CD's ground," Daniel replied. "And because the truth was already being used as a weapon against people who didn't deserve it." Then the prosecution introduced the final evidence. Audio recordings, time-stamped messages, financial transfers mapped across accounts. A single thread tied it all together. Victor's face drained of color as his own voice filled the room. "Accidents happen." Silence followed, thick, unmistakable. Victor's attorney whispered urgently. Victor shook his head once sharply. Beatrice stood suddenly. "This is a lie," she cried. "She's manipulating you." The judge's gavel struck. "Sit down." Beatrice did not. "She was always weak," she insisted, voice breaking. "I tried to protect her." Amina turned, finally facing her fully. "You protected yourself," she said softly. "At my expense." The judge ordered Beatrice removed if she could not compose herself. Beatrice collapsed back into her seat, the performance unraveling under the weight of evidence. After hours of argument, the judge recessed briefly. When she returned, the room stood. Her ruling was measured firm, an injunction upheld, assets frozen, charges to proceed against Victor Adeyemi for fraud, intimidation, and obstruction, a separate indictment authorized for coercion and financial abuse in Beatrice's case. Gasps, shifts, the sound of consequences arriving. Victor's shoulders sagged, anger hardening into something like disbelief. Beatrice stared ahead, hollow-eyed. Outside, the courthouse erupted. Reporters surged forward as Daniel and Amina descended the steps. Microphones clustered, questions collided. "Is justice finally served? Will you reclaim your company?" Daniel raised a hand. "Today is about accountability," he said. "Not celebration," Amina stepped forward, and about voice she added, especially for those who were taught not to use it. "Do you forgive them?" a reporter asked. Amina paused. "Forgiveness is personal," she said. "Justice is public." As they moved away, a familiar figure broke through the crowd. Beatrice. Security intercepted her, but not before her eyes found Amina's. There was no anger now, only something like fear. "You'll regret this," Beatrice whispered. Amina held her gaze. "I already survived you." Beatrice was led away. That evening the city buzzed with the verdict. Screens replayed clips, commentators debated implications. Names that once felt untouchable were spoken plainly, without reverence. In the quiet of the apartment, Amina finally let herself sit. Her body trembled not from fear but from release. Daniel knelt in front of her. "It's done," he said. "The worst of it," she replied. He nodded. "The rest will be work." She looked at him. Really looked at the man who had hidden, who had chosen poorly, and then chosen again. "Thank you," she said, "for standing where it mattered." Daniel shook his head. "Thank you for not letting me stand alone." Outside the city exhaled. Inside, two people who had been pushed, traded, underestimated, stood on the far side of a truth, finally spoken in full daylight. The climax had passed. What remained was choice. The morning after, the verdict felt strangely ordinary. Traffic hummed. Vendors argued over prices. The city did what it always did, kept moving. Amina stood by the apartment window with a cup of tea, growing cold in her hands, watching people hurry past below, unaware that something immense had shifted for her. Justice had spoken, but justice, she was learning, was not the same as peace. Daniel joined her quietly. He had slept little. Neither of them had. The adrenaline that carried them through the courtroom had faded, leaving behind a deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. "They've frozen the remaining accounts," he said. "Victor's lawyers filed an appeal, but it won't change the injunction." Amina nodded, and Beatrice Daniel hesitated. "She's been released on bail pending trial. Restrictions in place." Amina absorbed that in silence. She had expected relief. What she felt instead was something quieter, finality. "I thought I would feel angry," she said, "or happy." And Daniel asked. "I feel empty," she admitted, "like a room after furniture has been moved out." Daniel leaned against the window frame. "Emptiness can be a beginning." She smiled faintly. "You always sound like you've rehearsed these lines." He smiled back. "I've had time." The next weeks unfolded slowly, deliberately. Daniel declined interviews. He issued a single statement acknowledging the court's decision, committing to transparency, and stepping back temporarily, while an interim board managed operations. The move surprised many. It angered Victor's remaining allies. It steadied the company. Amina returned to small routines, walking, reading, cooking meals that tasted like comfort instead of survival. She enrolled in a short course she had once only dreamed about, using her own name, her own documents, her own choice. One afternoon, a letter arrived addressed to her in careful handwriting. "Beatrice." Amina stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The letter was not an apology, not truly. It spoke of misunderstanding, of fear, of a woman who believed control was care. Amina folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Daniel watched her from across the room. "You don't have to answer." "I won't," Amina said. "Not because I'm angry, because I'm done explaining my worth to her." Daniel nodded, understanding. One evening, Daniel asked her to walk with him. They chose a public park, busy enough to feel safe, quiet enough to talk. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft oranges and blues. "There's something we need to decide," Daniel said after a while. Amina felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but anticipation. I know. They stopped near a bench. Daniel turned to face her fully. Our marriage began under coercion, he said plainly, and then under secrecy. I don't want either of those to define what comes next. Amina met his gaze. Neither do I. I won't ask you to stay, Daniel continued, and I won't ask you to leave. I'm asking you to choose. She let the silence stretch, listening to her own breathing, her own thoughts. I spent most of my life being chosen, for Amina said. Chosen to serve, chosen to endure, chosen to disappear. Daniel listened without interrupting. I won't accept another life where I'm an accessory, she continued. Not to a villain. Not to a hero. He nodded. That's fair. She took a step closer. But I won't pretend what we've built means nothing either. Daniel's eyes softened. So here's my choice, Amina said. We stay married, publicly, but we rebuild it openly, slowly, on equal ground. Daniel exhaled, relief flickering across his face. And if you change your mind, then I leave, she said calmly. With respect, with safety, with my name intact. Daniel smiled. That's the only answer I would accept. They sat on the bench, shoulders close, but not touching, watching the sky darken. Months later, the trials continued. Victor's influence unraveled piece by piece. Former allies testified. Deals collapsed under scrutiny. He grew smaller in the public eye. Not dramatic, not tragic, just exposed. Beatrice's case moved more quietly. Community service orders, financial restitution, mandatory counseling. The law named what she had done, even if she never would. Amina did not attend those hearings. She attended her classes. She volunteered at a women's center once a week, not as a spokesperson, not as a symbol, but as someone who listened. One afternoon, a young woman approached her hesitantly. How did you do it? She asked. How did you leave? Amina considered the question carefully. I didn't leave, all at once, she said. I left in small truths, one choice at a time. Daniel returned to the company 6 months later. This time there was no secrecy, no disguise, no myth. He instituted reforms his father had only dreamed of: independent audits, worker representation, protections against retaliation. The process was slow, resistance fierce, but it held. At home, he and Amina learned the quiet work of partnership, disagreements, compromises, laughter that arrived unexpectedly. They argued about paint colors, about schedules, about nothing important and everything essential. One evening, as they cooked together, Daniel paused. I never thanked you properly, he said. For what Amina asked, stirring the pot. For staying, he replied, when leaving would have been easier. Amina smiled. Staying wasn't easy, she said. It was honest. He reached for her hand. This time she took it freely. The city never fully forgot their story. People recognized Amina, sometimes whispered her name, asked for photos. She declined politely, more often than not. Fame, she had learned, was just another form of noise. What mattered was quieter. The morning light, a cup of tea that stayed warm long enough to finish, the knowledge that her life was no longer a debt to be collected. One evening they returned to the old neighborhood. The house on Oladipo Street stood unchanged, paint peeling, gate rusted. Amina stopped across the street, breathing evenly. Daniel waited. I don't need to go in, she said finally. I just needed to know it doesn't own me anymore. They walked away hand in hand. Years later, when people told the story, they simplified it. They said a beggar was a CEO in disguise. They said justice triumphed. They said love conquered cruelty. Amina knew better. What saved her was not wealth, or disguise, or even love. It was choice, the right to say no, the courage to say yes, and the strength to speak when silence had once felt safer. That was the ending she claimed.
Life rarely changes in a single dramatic moment. More often, it shifts through quiet decisions that no one applauds at the time. The choice to speak when silence feels safer. The courage to walk away from control, even when it wears the mask of care. The strength to believe that dignity is not something anyone has the right to give or take. Amina's story reminds us that abuse does not always come with violence, and freedom does not always arrive with celebration.
Sometimes injustice survives because it is familiar. Sometimes healing begins the moment we stop explaining our worth to people who benefit from our pain. What saved her was not wealth, power, or rescue. It was the moment she understood that her life did not belong to fear, tradition, or manipulation, but to her own voice. Daniel's journey teaches another truth. Hiding may protect you for a while, but it slowly erases who you are. Real strength is not found in control, secrecy, or dominance.
It is found in accountability, in choosing to stand in the light even when the truth costs you comfort, reputation, or safety. Redemption does not come from pretending you never failed. It comes from facing the harm, naming it, and choosing differently. Together, their story speaks to anyone who has ever felt traded, underestimated, or silenced. Justice is not only about punishment, it is about restoration. Healing is not forgetting the past, it is refusing to let it define your future. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments. What part spoke to you most and why your voice matters here? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more journeys of truth, courage, and hope.